my computer with my thing off.
Oh yeah, but no, you have to go shower.
Yeah, but you can just take my computer. I'm going to be packing anyway.
Okay, I'll do that.
Do you want to do that? Or you can sign in. Okay, here. You can use it in your room or in here, whatever you want.
Let's see.
Can you guys see my screen currently?
Yes, we can see the PowerPoint slide.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So we're going to give Dr. Calafell and a couple of other people a little bit more time. We'll get started at between 7:05 and 7:10. Alrighty. Actually, since all the panelists are here, why don't we give everybody another like 3-ish minutes and then we'll get started at 7:05, just so more people can come in. Okay, let's just get started and we can just let everybody else trickle in as they feel. So welcome everybody and thank you for joining the SMSIG Surgical Residency Interview Panel. And I just want to say a couple of disclaimers. If everybody could keep their videos and microphones off so we could see our panelists, and that would be greatly appreciated. And then at the end, if there's time, we'll open up.
Good evening, Ravi. I'm not sure whether meeting is going on or we are waiting for to start.
Can you guys not hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I can hear you.
I don't think Dr. Radicki can hear you.
Dr. Radnicki, can you hear us?
No.
Okay. Esam. Okay. Can you guys see me and hear me? I don't know. You guys can see me? Okay, cool. Perfect. So we'll open up the floor at the end of the hour and a half. If there's any questions, as everybody is a practicing physician, we just want to respect everybody's time. So we'll try to get through all the questions that everybody submitted prior to, and then we'll just kind of go on about the panel. Now, my name is Gurjot Ravi. I'm the events coordinator for SMSIG. I'm a third-year medical student at Sinai. and I will be hosting today's panel. Now, why don't we go and start and introducing everybody, and we will start off with Dr. Rudnicki. He is the professor and chairman of the Department of Surgery at Ross University School of Medicine. And if you would like to come on, Dr. Rudnicki, and say a few words and introduce yourself, say hi. Dr. Rudnicki.
Gurge, I don't
think
he
he's
can
able
hear
to
you.
hear you. Yeah, maybe somebody can give him a quick call.
Okay.
And he may switch devices or give.
I will come back to him then. But next we have Dr. Heron. She's a board certified general surgeon and fellow of the American College of Surgeons. She's the director of surgical health and equity and community health integration at Mount Sinai Hospital in Chicago. Do you want to say a few words, Dr. Heron?
Hi, yeah. Thanks so much for inviting me here. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I've been just really floored by everything that your organization is doing, and just really wonderful work. And I'm excited to see kind of what comes of it and where it continues to go. So I appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to opening the conversation.
And
I think Dr. Rudnicki can hear us now, maybe. But thank you so much, Dr. Heron. Now we're going to move on to Dr. Calafell. Do you want to come on here and say a couple of words?
Sure. Hi, guys. Good evening. I'm Dr. Joel Calafell. I'm a Ross graduate from 2014. And that sounds like it's a long time ago, now that I say it out loud. I'm a general and colorectal surgeon down here in Miami at the Baptist Health System. Sorry, looks like I just got out of the OR because I did. I just had to take a lady with ischemic hemorrhoids to the operating room. So I'm happy to talk to you guys about the surgical interview process. It is a huge, huge deal, especially now that everything is it's kind of all this. It's Zoom, FaceTime, and things like that. So really, there's no, face-on-face contact anymore. So this is a really good time to practice and get a lot of insight of how interviewing is nowadays.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Calafell. Next, we have Dr. Jones. She is a board certified general surgeon, trauma surgeon, and critical care surgeon and a program director at Kern Medical. Dr. Jones, if you would like to come on and say a couple words, that would be awesome.
I think you already said everything, to be honest. I'm a trauma and acute care surgeon over in Bakersfield, California, at Kern Medical. We're starting a surgical residency this next year, but that doesn't mean I haven't been interviewing for the past couple of years in different capacities. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to go back to Dr. Rudnicki. Like I said, professor and chairman of the Department of Surgery at Ross University. If you want to come on, Dr. Rudnicki, and say something, say hello.
Oh, thank you very much for allowing me to participate and inviting me. I served for almost 25 years as program director. I interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants. And I'm glad that you decided to have that meeting. I hope that it will help many Ross students in their application process. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Rudnicki. And our last panelist is Dr. Elias. She currently is being consulted in the ED right now, and she'll be hopping on as soon as possible. But she is the sole board certified female colorectal surgeon in Bakersfield, so that's super cool. And now we can get started on the questions. So the plan is, what I will do is I will ask the question based off of the previous, the ones that everybody that has sent us. And what we'll do is whoever feels comfortable answering, we'll just open up the floor to everybody who wants to answer the question. We'll keep it an open conversation kind of situation. So I will start off with the first question. If you guys are all ready, the first question is, let's see, the first question will be, why are you not opening? So what is the best way for an applicant to introduce themselves? Is this supposed to be an elevator pitch, or should you try to keep it simple?
Silence. So I am ready
I
to
was
answer any questions. You know, so generally, you should know, an applicant should know that time is very limited for interview. That is sometimes 10 minutes per applicant, sometimes 15 or 20 minutes. So you don't want to lose unnecessary time by expanding your introduction. Good morning, Dr. So-and-so. I am Joe Smith, graduate from Ross University. I'm very happy to be here and ready for interview for position of categorical surgery or residency or preliminary. I would say very simple.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of the reading the room situation to some extent with this, which is kind of tough. Probably one of the most difficult questions you'll get is to tell me a little bit about yourself. It's like, where do you go with that? I think it is very true what Dr. Rutnicki was saying. That's a very limited amount of time. And, they've read your personal statements, well, we hope, and CVs, beforehand. So they really do have a sense of like what you are and who you are. This is your opportunity to kind of come at a little bit different angle. I mean, it's not like you want to do that too purposefully, but I think kind of getting like the nuggets in if you're asked a very generic and broad question, like tell me about yourself, is good. But I think it's also important to maybe get some things in there that might not be super obvious in your paper, what's in front of folks, and to kind of differentiate yourself to some extent. But yeah, I don't really love the whole elevator. I feel like the people that have come before me that were elevator pitch-y was a little bit of a turnoff, but see, that's very personal, right? So I don't know. What about you guys? Is that a turnoff, or do you like that when people come a little elevator pitchy?
I tend to make them push
tell
the
you
button
that when
down. I tend to tell
when
them
I was interviewing for my position, I had awesome advice from a Dr. Holt. Told me to have 2 life story ready.
Dr. Elias, you're breaking in and out a little bit.
Sorry, I was saying I was told by a mentor to have 2 sentences ready that could explain my entire life story, because no one has longer than that to listen to me. And that was so hard to come up with, but ultimately I think it was a great way to prove that I wasn't going to ramble on rounds.
But the question Ravi asked, how you introduce yourself, because usually interviewer, faculty member would ask you, tell me about yourself. And I think that all of you should have kind of few sentences, like Dr. Elias said, ready to deliver in beautiful way. So it has to be practiced and ready to say that.
Perfect. Dr. Calafella, I think you had a couple things you wanted to say.
I don't like the elevator pitch and the elevator rising. When I see an interviewee do that, I tend to make them push the elevator button straight down. I tend to not ask that question because it kind of puts people in a very rough spot. Some people have a lot to say. Some people have very little to say. We've all supposedly read your CV and your personal statements. We all know what you are on paper. The whole interview process to me is to kind of show yourself what you are off the paper. Okay. Remember, this is a surgical residency interview. We're trying to see if you not only mesh with us, do we mesh with you? Because if I can't stand talking to you for 15 minutes, what's 5 years going to look like? So, try to make yourself very sociable. Because you never know what you're going to talk about. One advice I would definitely recommend is make sure you know your CV and what you turned in cold. Because if they ask you about a research project and that's on your ERAS and you don't know anything about it, that doesn't sound good. Another thing is don't lie. Don't ever lie on your ERAS. I've caught 2 people in lies during interviews, and one of them was simple. At the very end of the ERAS, they ask you, what are your hobbies and do you speak any other languages? It's like the very end of the ERAS. I'm bilingual, and I had an interview. It said fluent in English and fluent in Spanish. So I introduced myself in Spanish. He had no idea what I was saying. So that's like something very dumb to lie in. So to me, that was kind of a shot down right there. So in terms of anybody were to ask you that question, just tell me about yourself, I would, Dr. Renucci, say, like, try to memorize a nice little paragraph about yourself that just kind of hits the highlights, and just, to me, throw something interesting about yourself that's not on your personal statement on your CV. Because if you're just rehashing your personal statement, it really drags on the interview. It really does.
One quick thing, I just wanted to kind of reiterate what he said. When he and I both were saying, like, we don't love the elevator pitch, I do want to make sure you understand, it's like Dr. Ritnicki said, Dr. Elias said, definitely practice something for that. Have something ready to say. It doesn't mean don't give it if the mood and it's obvious that that's something that they're asking for and you need it. But so definitely have something practiced to say, because it is actually a question that stumps people a lot of times if they get asked that. So just have that question ready. And then the other thing I would say is, I really hate to tell you this, but it's a popularity contest. That's my feeling. It is absolutely 100% how you jive with the person in front of you. Because there's going to be things that like interest you that person is interested in, that kind of makes you like, oh, wow, that's interesting. Let's talk about it. I feel like, because I'm actually naturally a very shy, quiet person. And if you're kind of timid and kind of feeble and meek, like, it doesn't come across super well. I'm not telling you to go out of your way to be somebody different than you are, but I just know that, like, the last interview cycle, I that kept kind of churning in my mind. I felt like, wow, the people that were more engaging, the people that were more talkative, a little more warm, like, it just was kind of, I could tell it was making me like feel like more positive. And I feel like that's like this unconscious bias thing that happens sometimes. But I do think it's important. Like, obviously you want to be authentic, but just like Dr. Calafil said, like, it is a way to present yourself in the best way you can. So sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dr. Rudnicki.
Maybe I would say something like disclaimer, and because that might escape from our meeting. Interview for residency is a game being played by applicant and by faculty member. Both of us, both sides are playing a game. Applicant would like to present himself or herself in the best possible way, and faculty members would like to present his program as attractive option for the applicant. We are interested in best applicants. They can have high emotional intelligence, which is kind of action word right now over the last few years. Emotional intelligence, the person who is applying can fit into the program, that has skills that can make me as faculty member safe during critical situations for taking, if he or she is taking care about my patient. So there is a game. We are looking for the best people who can interact with all other residents, with 20, 30 group of residents, and that guy would play the best possible way. He would understand, he would work very hard, and everything would be perfect. And resident is smiling. I can see in front of my eyes all these girls smiling from here to here, showing their teeth and eyes and beautiful hair, and men with ties and everything. And they would like to present themselves in the best way. But sometimes we look, and I would say, why he is so cocky? Why he feels that he is the best in the world if his letters and grades are kind of average. Why she is so timid that she does not want to say a lot about her. She's only asking questions, yes or not. You are looking for a partner that you would work for 5, 6 years in a row. And that's why we are looking for people with open mind that can will be very easy to talk, to contact, interact, and they can be successful after residency programs. We are not looking for mediocre people. We are looking for leaders. And remember that this is a game. Last sentence, when you are introducing, when question is, okay, tell me about yourself, you need to be ready to attract attention of faculty member. What I mean by saying that you can like fishing rod, you can fish his attention and put him into corner that, okay, I am going to tell something that he is going to ask me about that. And then have a look, I have answer for that very esoteric question that he is going to say, okay, that will be very hard for that applicant to answer, but you are ready for that answer because you prepared that question, and he doesn't know that you were playing game with him and you are smarter than him.
Thank you, Dr. Rudnicki. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Jones?
I kind of agree with Dr. Heron, and I feel like it's a read the room situation a lot of the times. I mean, especially if you guys come into it with a canned answer. I feel like if someone gives me a canned answer and it's like this verbal vomit of 2-3 sentences, and it's just something you've rehearsed, it sounds rehearsed. And so I feel like if you mean it honestly, if you've actually evaluated who you are and what you love, and I think they'll feel that, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, but just like Elias said, I think maybe if you can shorten it down to the couple things that really describe you and then really say that like you mean it, except for, if it just comes out that it's like, it seems like you just had those 2 lines rehearsed. So, and I kind of hate that when people do that. When I ask, hey, what's your weakness? And people are like, oh, it's this, and it's because this, and this. And you're like, you obviously, know the answer to that question, but it's such a rehearsed answer that you didn't give it any thought. So I don't know. I feel both ways.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to the next question so that we can get the ball, keep on moving, like have it moving.
Can I just add one quick thing? Just with what Dr. Rudnicki was saying about the fishing rod. I mean, obviously we want you to be authentic and put your best face and authentic self forward, but like when I was talking about popularity contests, like let's say the attending in front of you does a lot of research and you've done some and you like it, or maybe it's kind of a secondary thing to you. And they might not even bring up the research, but they're asking about yourself. You've gone online, you've looked up what this person does and what they like. They're into research. You don't want to be, like Dr. Jones says, like just kind of shoving all that in someone's face, but it might be the opportunity to kind of highlight that a little bit when you're introducing yourself, whereas you might do that less than other times, but again, you still want to just put the you forward because we do feel that when it's authentic. But I think that's kind of what he meant, and it is true, and that's what I was saying about popularity. Like you do feel like a connection with some people when you start talking about things that you enjoy together, and it's like, wow, like It's kind of not fair, but it's kind of the way it works. I guess it's human nature to some extent.
I would agree with what you are saying. Sometimes it's not what you say, but how you say it. So generally, if you are going for interview, you have to be ready, you have to study, you have to know everything. Recently, one resident told me when I went, she was preliminary and currently categorical resident at cardiovascular surgery at Houston Heart Institute, the Beckett's department. So she said, when I went for an interview, I knew everything from A to Z about each faculty on that department, each publication, names of the dogs and cats, husband, everything. But it's not, it's not appropriate, or saying that, oh, I know your research, your publication. No, it's not the way how it should be played. You have to say between lines that the person who interviews you understands and has clear mind that you know about his research. So generally, that is kind of a little bit actorship, that you have to be actor during that interview. You have to practice before that you can deliver appropriate statements that he can convert, and both you convert that interview, which is kind of difficult, to engaging meeting that in 10 minutes, oh, I'm sorry that we cannot discuss that. It was so pleasure talking with you. Maybe you can contact me in a few weeks so you can tell me something. So that is how interview should end up. Not something, I am tired, finally, go away from me and period.
And not necessarily know every piece of research the person has done, but like if they see that you're animated and energized by research as they are, it's getting put in their mind like, oh, maybe that's somebody who might want to do some papers. This is someone we do a lot of research here, and it kind of puts that more at the forefront. So, okay, sorry, you go ahead.
Thank you, everybody, for your guys' responses. And you guys had mentioned research quite a bit. And the next question actually is, if an applicant has multiple research experiences, how do you go by choosing and asking them about their research? Do you pick one experience? Do you ask them about all? Do you tell them to elaborate?
Sorry, the question was that you're being interviewed by a faculty member that has a lot of research, or the applicant has a lot of research?
The applicant has a lot of research. How do you go about asking the applicant about their research?
I mean, what I do is, the research should be on their personal statement. So usually when I get sorry, not the personal statement, the CV. Usually when I get their ERAS application, I'll look at their research, and if one of them finds it to be interesting, I will actually look up the paper and read about it. So I generally tend to ask them, "Oh, tell me about this research project. I found it really interesting," and then you elaborate on it. But you better know it. Even if you were like the sixth author on the paper, you better know about it. You can't respond to that question was, well, I really didn't work on the project that much. I kind of just stapled it really nice and printed it out really nice. That's not a good answer. So definitely know all the research that has your name attached to it. But generally, I ask about research topics that I thought were interesting. If you did research on sugar cubes making rabbits bigger, I don't really care about that. But if you did one about, sequel volvulus to resect or pexy, I can talk to you about that because that's kind of interesting.
So I used to ask.
Don't ever pexy.
I used to ask questions, about research. I reviewed CV and ERAS application. So I asked, oh, you did some research. Tell me about that project. What was your hypothesis? How you wanted to prove your hypothesis and how you make that conclusion. So I wanted to know whether that applicant has has kind of scientific ideas about research. It's not that you go, oh, I did from one probe to another in the lab. No, I'm asking, what did you do to prove your idea, or what was your part in creating idea? That was I was most interested. It is hard to, you phrase that question about, most important project or whatever. People have one or two, and there is exception that people have 20 different papers. But those with 20 papers can answer every question about research. Usually those people with one or two have actually no idea, like Dr. Calafal said, what did you do with that? And I was just part-time participant in that project, so I have no idea what was going on. But they put my name on list of authors.
For me, my purpose of asking about research will be a selfish motivation. Are you going to be able to publish during residency? And if you do, are you going to represent my program well when it comes time to present that research? And so that's really what I'll be looking for.
So you may be disappointed. Sometimes you've done a lot of research. And let me tell you, a lot of people have outstanding applications with research, presentations, posters, publications, volunteering, curing cancer. I mean, everybody, I think it's probably because internet age, everyone's experience is very, very wide and broad and comprehensive. And so, I mean, because like back in the day, there would be like a little cohort of people that did research and a little smaller cohort that had a couple publications. Now people are very intentful about making sure that they have all of that in their applications. And yes, you certainly review it, but it is a very short amount of time in the interview. And so sometimes it doesn't come up at all. And so there should be an opportunity for you if you're asked about, this is when like your strengths come out, like again, some of those more generic questions about like a time when you had a challenge. And maybe the time was just, something technical in the research you did, or interfacing with other people, or frustration about the process. Being able to talk about that kind of thing is actually really nice, tells a lot more about a person. Sometimes than just knowing about the research, which is pretty self-explanatory when you see the title or go look up, the article. So I would just say be prepared to talk about it kind of holistically as well. And then also if you get some challenging questions, you might in your back of your mind be like, oh my gosh, we only have like 3 minutes left and they haven't even asked me about my research. I spent all this time on it. There are other ways to get that into the conversation if appropriate. And again, that's another part about kind of like reading the room situation as well.
Dr. Jones?
Sorry, I like listening to you guys. To be honest, I completely agree. I mean, I've not asked people about their research just because I feel like maybe if they've got a couple projects, maybe everyone else is asking about the research, and I think just like Dr. Heron just said, I think it's reading the room. I think if they really want to know about your research, they'll ask. If they really want to know about a different part of your application, they'll ask. And if they don't get a good vibe from you in the first place, they'll probably ask. So, I mean, to be honest, you could probably slip your research in if you were really excited about it, if it meant something to you. But just like Joel said, Dr. Calafell said, I feel like if you didn't really have an authentic part in that research, and if you really didn't care about what was produced, then probably don't bring it up. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add in about the research, every faculty member is very different on how they interview. I'm very much, I want to see who you are off the paper. I know your research. I know what you said in your personal statement. I want to get to know the real you. So, Dr. Rudnicki brought up a fishing rod. You bring up fishing rod and fishing with me, that's probably all we're going to talk about in 15 minutes, because I love fishing. Okay, so I mean, I want to see who you are, kind of off the paper, and try to, especially if you're shy, I really try to get you to open up a little bit, because I'm a very outgoing personality, so shy people and me don't mesh very well. But so I try to really bring you out, because shy, just because you're shy doesn't mean you have nothing to say. And most of the time, shy people have a lot of wisdom and a lot of things to say, just not very loudly. But you just gotta give them the stage to let their voice be heard. So I really try to do that for you, especially if you're a little bit on the shy side at baseline.
Dr. Calafell brought up a really good point. Remember, you're going to probably have 3 interviewers who are going to have a lot of different personalities, a lot of different questions. And so don't think just because like your first one went really horribly, or the first 2 went really well and they really didn't ask much, we just, shot the shit for a little bit. Still kind of be prepared. Take each one individually. Same between each institution, because you may have had 1 or 2 and like, okay, I feel really comfortable. It was really more just like, let me tell you about the program. They didn't ask much about me, whatever. And then you get somewhere else and it might be your top choice. And suddenly the style of interview, the content was so different. So still just really try to keep that reverence of being prepared, mentally and physically for whatever might come, no matter what. Don't get complacent with it.
Dr. Heron mentioned about 3 interviewers. Majority of institutions have meetings after interviews. So, and if they have 3 interviewers or 3 interviews, very often each one serves different aspects of application. One interviewer will focus on your background. They are going to ask you where you are from, how you are doing, and that type of question. Second would ask questions about your academic research background. So generally, what what courses, what rotations, and so on. And the last one, or the first one, at least one of those 3, would evaluate your emotional intelligence. It means, as I mentioned before, how intelligent you are, how you are going to feed into the system, what is beyond numbers and information that you provided in your CV. And later, when they meet, everybody reports on his aspects of interview. So, and you don't know what they are going to ask you. But generally, I disagree with people who convert the interview to additional medical exam or something like that. That is kind of not in the mainstream of interviews for residency.
Thank you, Dr. Rudnicki. Does anybody else have anything else to add? Or we can head on to the next question. I don't know where everybody went. So the next question is there a particular section on the ERAS application that you always bring up or ask the applicant about? And what, if you do, what section would that be?
For me, it's going to be interests. That's something that's easy and fun to talk about, and as everyone has already mentioned, will help me to see who you are off of the paper.
It's very funny how both colorectal surgeons say the same thing: interests and hobbies.
I completely agree. So the trauma surgeon agrees. I feel like the interests more accurately describe, and you can see how authentic the applicant is. You know their paper, you know their applications. So some parts of it are interesting to ask about, but at the same time, you want to know about them.
Dr. Heron, anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely. It really kind of actually varies from person to person whom I'm in front of. It's kind of like what captures me from their personal statement and CVs. So it really kind of varies in kind of the direction of our conversation from the beginning.
Dr. Rudnicki, anything else to add?
Nothing. I already took enough time from your meeting, so.
Thank you. So we can move on to the next question. Try to get as many questions as we can going. Now this next one is, what question should an applicant never ask the interviewers at the end of the interview? Or if there's a topic they should stay away from?
Stuff that it's easy to find online.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Can you repeat, please?
What questions should
Yes.
No, I know yours, but
I said anything that is easy to find online. So if the website says X, Y, and Z about our program, don't ask that question that lets me know that you didn't take the time to even look at our website.
Yes, that's perfect, and most important example of wrong question. You have to know everything what is given on website. That is simple, and you need to let your interviewer understand that you know that without saying explicitly, oh, I know that you have rotation in those hospitals. You have to maneuver with your language in such a way that between lines, you are going to let him know that you are well aware about all implications. Maybe I can tell you what I personally didn't like, but I am kind of old boy, and surgeons with whom I used to work, they were also not teenagers. We did not prefer applicants who were asking about quality of life during surgery residency. If you are going to surgery, you have to understand that surgery is not kind of job that you are doing from 7 o'clock to 5 p.m. We kind of devoted our lives to surgery, and somehow it's still in our brains and minds. I know that times are changing. People are looking for more relaxed environment, but somehow still that always reverberates. Oh, she asked about quality of life, so maybe she should go to another direction.
So it used to be the death knell to ask what the hours were like at a residency program. Like, you did not even ask the residents that. It was just like the death knell. Same with like quality of life issues, et cetera.
Thank you,
No,
Dr.
it's
Heron.
true. It's true. And so like that is probably, those are two of the most common questions now. And so when they are, and sometimes they're like the first question, and it still kind of knocks me back when I hear it, because I'm like, oh my gosh, did they just ask that? But it's kind of like the norm. We're just, hey, it's the millennial age. There's like books this big on how to deal with millennials in the workplace, right? So that is a common question. He's completely right. It really takes our generation aback to hear that, but it is common. And actually a lot of applicants, when they don't like the answers to that, or it's clear that it doesn't match their lifestyle, they don't even want to be wherever you are. So they really kind of self-exclude themselves anyway. But what I will say, I think, is now the death knell, and I think very important, have a question to ask. Okay? Because at that end, when you have a few minutes left and they take the grace of asking you if you have any questions about the program, it looks really, really bad. And like you have no interest, no concern if you have nothing to ask. So even if you're disinterested, or you didn't have a chance to research a place, or you really don't have questions because everything, they've got a great website and you spoke to a bunch of people, even if you ask the same question to the previous interviewer, have something to ask, please. Please.
I would
Interview
agree
needs to be
150%.
engaging. You need to talk, engaged in discussion. So if you have no questions, it means that you are very superficial.
Or you didn't take the time to really investigate the program, because not every program is perfect. There are definitely things that can be improved upon, or you have questions about that are not on the website, that have not been answered by the residents. When someone asks me the question, the hour question, I always say, you know what the duty hour restrictions are, right? There's your answer. that's kind of my answer to that. Another one that I had, my for fellowship, actually, this is when we were helping with the fellowship interviews. What was the salary? And I'm like, did he really just ask that? Like, I almost said that out loud, and I was like, and I remember the meeting after, like, he asked me about the salary, and everybody was dumbfounded. Like, it's on the website. I know, but the fact that he even asked it, like, you never asked that.
One more comment. I would prefer if applicant is asking me not what is, but rather how that affects the program. It means, let's say, do you have orientation? That question from student MS1. Applicants should ask how orientation affects performance of residents during their rotation, how they do. It's not do you have research. I would rather expect that how potential research may affect my career when I am finishing your program. that kind of question that shows me depth of your thinking and commitment and professionalism on your side.
Dr. Jones?
I can't help but think that, I mean, there's got to be a better way to ask almost any question, right? And I feel like the worst questions I've ever been asked have to do with, off the top of my head, how much vacation time do you get? Which is one of those questions where you're just like, oh boy, that's not a great question. Maybe a better question to ask. And I mean, it kind of borders on the quality of life question, but how do your residents, what do your residents do in their off time? Or, I mean, there's got to be a better way to ask the question if you really want to know. Or, I mean, granted, don't be flagrant about it and just think that, I'm only concerned about the life outside of the hospital. But at the same time, I think that and just like Dr. Heron said, there's definitely a quality of life issue that I think even the programs that I interviewed at, when talking to the residents, you get the feel for, man, they hate their lives. And, you definitely don't want to be in a program where you don't fit in and you will hate your life. And I feel like there's to come up with a better way to ask the question, and however you want to ask it, but don't be flagrant about asking, hey, how much can I get out of?
Dr. Elias, anything to add?
No, I think everyone said it well.
I do want to just pipe in one thing. Some questions that are very obvious that have already been stated that were more appropriate to ask a resident. Okay. I mean, I know sometimes it's hard because there are a lot of virtual and you're not like in person, but again, quality of life probably hits that. And even with that, I'd be a little cautious. And I mean, I want you to get your answers to your questions and to feel comfortable with the program to know you're making the right decision. But sometimes the residents are the one that come back and say, I can't believe they asked me, like, how many days off do we get, or this, that, and the other. So that's another one to play by ear. If you've got a resident taking you around or talking to you who's speaking a lot about quality of life and hours and that kind of thing, go for it. Hopefully, if not, you might choose to like talk to somebody else, a separate call at a certain time, separate time to ask things like that. Because it still is important to get your questions answered, right? We want you to get authenticity about the programs, but I think you just still have to, be cautious with some of those things.
I think as a person who wanted to find out if programs were family friendly or not, a sneaky way to ask that would be to the residents, not to the attending. Do the families of the residents ever get together? That way you're not saying, hey, can I have a baby during this residency? But you are finding out without asking them directly as well, are there families? What do those families look like? Is there a social life at all?
I think along those same lines, just to piggyback off of that, be careful what you ask the residents. I know the prior program that I was at, we got together, the faculty got together with the residents, and they brought back almost everything that was said that either good or bad. And just be careful. They might seem really friendly and really genuine, but at the same time, they are another member of that program. And if you go on and say, hey, at the last program, I really did this, this, and this, and it's really bad, and they'll just feed that back, and they'll instantly. I mean, even if it's like the night before, and you're having like a dinner with the residents, or like an like an open drink night, don't get tanked. We've had several residents do that in the past. And just be careful with what you say. Don't seem too ridiculous, because the residents will bring that back.
Dr. Jones, I don't know you personally, but you are 100% right. Residents are part of the program and they are defending their program. They are not on your side. They are on our side. And everything, when you enter the hospital, whatever happens to you, when you walk and you don't say hello to housekeepers or whatever, that would come to program. on the same day, they are going, oh yeah, there was applicant who was walking, she had a short black dress or red shirt or whatever, she behaved inappropriately, down. And then something else, inappropriate question to residents, like Dr. John said, immediately down. Residents are part of us. They are taking care about the program, and they would like to have someone that would fit into current structure of the system. So you have to play good person, absolutely, and because you are good person, I hope.
It depends a little bit on the program, but you'd be surprised how much power the residents have when they go back to their faculty, program director, assistant program director, and say, listen, no, not of this person. You should have heard what they said or how they acted during the resident hour. I don't care what they told you during the interview while they're in their monkey suit. Like like trust me, there's something wrong with this person. You'd be surprised. I know in my residency, it's up. We've had several applicants that we would go to our program director and say, listen, at the resident happy hour, this happened, this happened. I mean, I'm sure they interviewed really well, but this person is as fake as can be. And yeah, that person wasn't even ranked. So you'd be surprised how much power they have. But at the same token, if you're really nice, very genuine, the residents will go to bat for you as well. So maybe the interview day, you were a little nervous or anything, but you know, we've definitely, I know personally, I stood up for an applicant that I thought was a very good, solid person, very nice to everybody, very genuine, but just a little shy. And I remember at the meeting, and I said, listen, you know, maybe she was a little gun shy, very nervous, but she's a genuine, very good character, moral person. She'll be a good fit with the program. And that elevated her ranking.
Awesome, thank you. Now we're going to move on to the next question. So what is an example, or what are some example of questions you've asked that are intended to kind of catch the applicant off guard? Being like, what would you consider your walk-off song to be? Or what is the last non-medical related book you've read?
That's not really my style, but I can tell you the weirdest one I ever got when I was interviewing was if you could take a rocket one way and find out the cure for cancer, but you couldn't ever come home to see your family and there wasn't enough fuel to get you back, would you do it?
Very, very interesting. I guess we can do both ways. Has there been a question that you've been asked that you're like, what the heck is this?
I will say I ask it now in memory of my favorite mentor. What is your favorite curse word? Because they have to know what you're going to say when you mess up in the operating room. And since he knew I was bilingual, he told me English and Spanish, please. So in memory of Dr. Koshai, because he passed away, I always ask that question now. Another good one that I've been asked was what was it? If you won the lottery, would you continue your surgical career?
I feel like I asked you guys the stumpy question instead of the other way around.
Well, we don't want to give up all of our questions.
That's very true as well. That is very true.
I was asked to pick an actor or actress who would represent me during each stage of my life.
Interesting.
That's a phenomenal question. That is awesome.
Okay, since we don't want to give all the secrets away, let's move on to the next question. So as a lot of applicants are prelim, I mean, either do a preliminary year coming straight out of medical school or did a research year, is there a certain type of applicant that you would prefer more than the other? So a prelim year versus a research year versus straight out of med school.
I don't fully understand your question because if someone is applying for research, they are not coming for interview for residency. So there's completely different pathway. For if someone is applying for categorical or preliminary residency, they are coming for interview. For research, they are coming for completely separate interviews, and those people are not applying for residencies.
I think by research year, they meant like a gap year to do research. So like a prelim year versus a gap year versus straight out of medical school.
Okay, so you are talking about selection for career. If someone feels too weak to apply for a residency, then they are going to do research. That is your question, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I feel that being preliminary resident can give the applicant better background to be converted or upgraded to categorical resident than 1 year of research. Because if you do 1 year of research, then in a few months, you are going to be almost in the same position as right now. A little bit better, but not tremendously jumping up.
Bryce, can you take this, please?
Dr. Jones or Dr. Heron, anybody else want to add in?
I think it really just depends. Oh, yeah, wasn't sure if I was off mute. I think any of those things are fine. It just totally depends on the person and what they've made of the opportunity. I think it would be unfair and probably not accurate to just categorize one as better than the other. It's really just how you're able to explain what you've done, the intention, what you've learned. That for me is the most important thing. I do think it's important and good and makes you more competitive if you've actually done something like intentful during the gap. Let's say there's a time interval, or yeah, I'd rather see you've done research than like there were 8 months where kind of nothing happened. Prelim year, I don't mind. I mean, I actually love the fact that people are doing anything and everything they can to attain their goal and achieve their dream. So yeah, I think I'm open to any of those things. I don't really have a preference.
So there's a very similar question about substantial gaps as well in your application. So how do you go about answering those as well? I mean, being IMGs and a lot of the Ross kids having about 3 to 5 months, sometimes like being placed. How do you go about answering those questions?
So I personally think you need to go out of your way to do something important. I know it's really tough because you're like in that weird phase where you're not a medical student anymore, so you can't apply for med student stuff. You may need financial support, so you might need a job. It's a very short interval. Plus, you're tired and you probably want to like do fun stuff. But I think you can still manage those things with at least having something that looks good. A lot of people are not going to understand like the rolling admissions. So whether it's just helping somebody from, because I've met a couple medical students that from afar are helping with research, just like chart checking and things like that. Whether it's spending a couple months in a lab and hey, you might not get a paper out of it, but you're helping. You can say I worked at this university lab with this person. It just, to me, it's better to have something like real and intentful and that looks good on paper during that gap. I think that is an absolute necessity.
Yeah, you need to, when you submit application, you need to be ready for all questions, particularly to cover unexplained breaks in studying. So be ready and have answer ready. And plus that usually faculty members, they understand many hardships and problems that can happen. But answer should be kind of in line with career, like Dr. Heron said, career, finances, family problems, but usually related to your career building.
One thing I wanted to add, I said before that people don't understand the rolling admissions. There are a couple of things. One, they might not even notice because they're looking at so many applications or just looking where you went to school. Every once in a while, like it's a year, like a different year. So your mind kind of peaks up like, wait, then you go back and see like, what did they do in between. So I think because of that, you may need to just be prepared to like throw that in or explain if it seems like you need to. You know what I mean? Because they're not going to understand that the reason for that is because that's when your year ends, right? You're done with school. You didn't have a break because of some, adverse thing that happened that, you had to step away for a bit. You need to be able to like say, well, we're enrolling admissions. We actually graduate in June and whatever. And during this subsequent time, I've done this. I think if it comes up, because a lot of times people don't even notice.
Someone asked about writing notes during interviews. That would look very strange. Someone applying to residency in surgery should have enough mind to keep everything in the head, not necessary to write notes. You can write notes after interview, but not during the interview. That would be kind of out of line. I don't recall even one student writing notes.
Yeah,
I'm going to
never
respectfully
suggest
disagree.
that.
I wrote notes at all my interviews and matched my number one.
There you go. There's an example. I would say also for the gap, the gap question, I had it brought up once or twice because they're able to see the gaps of everything, even from your undergrad to med school, which was my only gap. And just be honest, I think the answer they don't want to hear is, well, undergrad or med school was way too stressful, so I just need a year off to like just kind of like veg out. Like for me, I took a year off in between undergrad and med school, and my reasoning was that during undergrad I took over my high school wrestling coach, so I took over the wrestling team. So my last year when I was gonna apply to med school, I had 3 kids ranked top 5 in the state and one ranked number 1, and I'm like, I'm not gonna leave these kids their senior year for me to go to med school. I gotta coach them to the states. So that's why I stayed behind 1 year.
That would be interesting answer. That would be interesting answer. How you build your career and how you kind of devoted 1 year to promote career of others. I think that would be perfect. You would make a lot of points saying that.
So like the way we do ours, we only see your CV and personal statement, not the ARIS. And the whole purpose of that is to be able to view you holistically. You don't know your scores and all that. And so it gives a very different, interaction. And so the gaps would only be seen on the CV and you'd have to really be paying attention. I don't know how many programs do it like that, but that's why I said that. Somebody asked about negative parts of your application. Should you address them anyway? If it doesn't come, from my perspective, if it doesn't come up, I wouldn't just go out of my way to say, oh, by the way, this bad thing happened. Because a lot of times we're just having a conversation, It's really just an opportunity to get to know you and kind of see your strengths. And yes, sometimes it's obvious what the weaknesses or the problems are that may or may not be addressed. Or you may just during the conversation realize that it doesn't need to come up. Same with the prelim year. Like I've seen some people, because some people ask, should I write in my personal statement for my new application for a categorical, should I put that I'm a prelim? And, I've seen it both ways. I've seen some people completely not say prelim, but then say during this year of internship, I've had a lot of experience, or the time I've been rotating this last year for the surgical service, I've gotten a lot of experience. And then that kind of lets you know, oh yeah, I guess, go back to the CV, look, oh yeah, I guess it must be a prelim somewhere. So, I mean, I think it's just important to like do what's comfortable to you and comfortable to what you feel you're able to talk about and address. But as far as like going deeply out of your way to say, well, you didn't ask about X, Y, Z, which is really negative or bad, I want to bring it up and talk about it because it kind of diverts the conversation away from like the intent. Because trust me, I think they're going to be able to get to the stuff that they need to one way or the other, or one of the 3 people. Because some people are just direct and like that. So that was kind of how I feel about that.
Along those same lines, I had an applicant once who had really poor scores, but the rest of his application looked really great. And towards the end of the interview, he just casually brought it up, and then he struggled through his explanation, which was terrible. It was like I just wanted to stop it for him. Like I just wanted to cut him off. So I mean, unless you have a really good answer, I wouldn't bring up any negative points because a lot of people don't really have the grace during a stressful interview to explain negative things, and I think sometimes it makes you look worse for the wear.
And then as far as the notes, I think it would kind of throw me off a little bit for someone to be doing that because I mean, especially with like the remote or even in person, it's really like a one-on-one face-to-face time, which we so rarely have these days. So it'd be kind of strange when you're talking, at least for like my interviews, they're pretty like, I don't want to say laid back, but you know, it's not this note-taking necessity type of interaction. So I think it would feel a little off and weird. But at the same time, I totally understand like a person like that because I have moments where I'm like that as well. But like, I don't know. I think you could probably try to get away with not. You practice a little bit, see if you can do it without doing your notes. I think that would go over better because it really is about the interaction and just like the feeling you get from somebody. And I don't necessarily think that's fair for the whole interviewing, but it really is true.
So people sometimes.
To clarify, I was taking notes during the presentations on the residency. So usually for residencies, they have a PowerPoint, they have a presentation. This is why you come here. I took notes on that. I also had pre-prepared notes from the website such that I had well thought out questions that when it came that time, I could say, well, you know, I refer to my notes. I saw this, this, and this. Can you clarify this?
There is nothing wrong. I'm talking about notes taken when I'm eye to eye, sitting in a simple room, and someone is taking note what I'm saying or what she's saying. That's somehow strange for me. One thing, I remember interviews when people started crying, both male and females. They are getting so nervous and very pleasant, very smart, but there is so much tension and desire, and to show themselves that suddenly they start crying when they are talking about their plans or past or future. So I would not call that something strange, but look, I'm old enough, I'm father, I understand what kind of emotions are going through minds, but maybe younger faculty members would see that as very strange. I do not personally. I do not. And remember, all students remember that interview is a game that we would like to match the best person and you would like to match to be on top number one candidate for every program you are interviewing for. And we would like all applicants to list us as number one program they would like to match. That's a game. That's matching system. That's how it works.
So we'll do one more question and then we'll open the floor up for any other additional questions from the audience. We'll do how to answer what is your greatest weakness and how to answer a very tough situational question. What would be your advice?
I'm sorry, once again, what is your question?
How to answer what is your greatest weakness and how to answer tough situational questions.
Okay, whenever silence, I feel obligated to stop. So we have how many? 30 people in the room. So all of you needs to be prepared for a question like that one. And try to answer that question. What is your weakness? That weakness you need to convert into your strong side. So somehow that you converted and you need to give example how something was weak in your life and you are able to convert into strong side of your performance or your CV or whatever. That would work the best from my perspective. You know, I was weak, you know, I couldn't take exams, so I was crying and so on. That is not correct, that right answer. Rather, I failed, I took appropriate steps, and I addressed that, and I had also B solution for that. If I'm not doing well second time, I can do something better, and so on. But be ready for a question like that one, absolutely.
Yeah, I think you just have to prepare yourself for a lot of those kind of mundane, regular, expected questions regardless, because I promise you they're always the hardest ones to answer, like on the top of your hat. You know, you think, oh, if someone asks me my weaknesses, that's easy. I don't even next, you're preparing for some more deep level question, but they really are very, very difficult questions to answer. So definitely be prepared. If you get stumped during the interview, it can get scary. I've had people really break down, especially if it happens at the beginning. And so one time I even had to just say, let's just move on to another, it's okay. Let's just move on to another question. Cause I could tell it was just like about to cry. It wasn't even about like, it was just like a esoteric question. It was a nothing question, but it just took him very off guard. And what I want to tell you is just take the interview moment by moment. Do your best not to let like a moment like that or something that you felt like you screwed up ruin the whole rest of the time. Just try to start afresh with the next thing. That's really important. And then also, if there's a question that stumps you, you have spent so much time earning all of these things that are on your CV, all the things that you've done and written on your multiple versions of your personal statement and tried to cut it down to the page that it needs to be. Use those things or experiences from things that you've done in your volunteering or research or schooling or your gap years or whatever your family experience. If you have a pause and you can't figure out the answer what your weaknesses are, then think about something. Just take your mind back to like your CV, what you've done, your CV, your personal statement. Find something in there. Yes, it might be a little less authentic because you're just trying to pull something to be able to answer the question, but it's really like in a good soft spot to kind of fall back on if you get stumped for questions, like challenges you've had, that kind of thing. Those are good places to kind of fall back on. Not necessarily say, oh, I wrote this paper, yada, 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 but just something from the experience that you can use to answer the question.
I think
the worst thing you can do in that question is say the very generic, oh, I work too hard. Oh, I'm a perfectionist. Please don't say that. I will ask you to leave the room. Be genuine. Dr. Rudnicki said it, there's 30 people listening to this. There are 30 different weaknesses. Just be genuine. But I do agree that say it as an example and what you are doing or what you did to overcome that weakness. For example, me personally, when I was a med student, and probably this is very common, I had an issue on focusing on the very little things on a patient's history and not giving the actual like big main points, not focusing it all together. So, I would say an example is what I did was I wrote down the patient's history and I made myself a little square on my paper. I said, everything has to fit in this little square. This is the important chunk. Whatever's outside this square does not matter. And that's what I did. And I still do that.
Okay, so you talked about authenticity, but here we go. So if you are a hard worker or you are obsessed, you are perfectionist, sure, I agree, probably don't answer it like that, but like have some type of prepared response because that's you, that's your personality. Like I find another way to say it. I tend to, really, really go after something until it gets done. And sometimes that, kind of interferes with, my quality of life or whatever. I don't know. Just find another way of saying, because you are a perfectionist, you are hardworking. Find another way of saying it to be authentic to you, but a little less like, run of the mill. And like shutting down, because you hear everybody say that. Just still find a way to say it. And those are the things why we're talking about practicing it. Maybe somebody can explain that better than I can, but that's my feeling about it.
No, I would say the same thing. I think if it is you're a perfectionist, then you're, yeah. I mean, whatever answer you give, give some way that you're working on that weakness, and don't just give a positive thing as a weakness, right? If you really are a perfectionist, your follow-up better be why this is a problem in your life, right? And what you're doing to overcome this, right? You just can't give a positive, a seemingly negative thing and make it the positive at the same token. But that's something, I mean, as long as you're genuine, just like Dr. Heron said, I mean, if you really have a problem with something, then, this is what I'm due to work on it. This is how this is how I'm dealing with it. And I think that's what people are more than happy to hear, is that you've examined your own life, you've examined your own work habits, and this is what you're working on.
All right, thank you so much. Now, before we open up for everybody to ask whatever they feel like asking, is there anything that you think students should know right now that we did not ask? Like a one-line situation, like a one-line advice.
I can say, in terms of what you're going to wear, you do not want to stand out because of your outfit. So keep that in mind. I say that as someone who likes fashion, but the interview day is not the day.
I have two things. One, when it comes to like your experience with your research and volunteering and all that kind of thing, and my students here have heard me say this many times, it's really more important to be able to talk about what you learned from it, whether it be like from the research or medicine versus even just personally or growth wise or professionally. I because everybody has all this hardcore like bench work and papers and stuff on their applications. But for you to be able to like talk about the experience or something you learned from it or a hardship or some growth you had from it is really, really, I think, very impactful. And especially when you're answering some of those, kind of generic, what is your weakness, your strength, and I'm not telling you to just veer right towards that type of conversation, but use that to help present yourself, because it also is presenting kind of the medical you as well. And I think that's like the best thing you can get from all these experiences, like this group that you've started. It doesn't matter if you were president or vice president. It matters that you're able to talk about like what you did, what it felt like, or hardships you had, that kind of thing, or wins. The other thing I would say is, I don't know how many are still remote, but be very cautious with your background. Okay. I think it's very weird sometimes when it's literally just like nothing. Okay. Sometimes that throws me off just as much. But I've had a couple people who had like very purposely put like all their stuff, like big, huge picture of the family and, someone liked Minnie Mouse and had them all just artfully stacked. And like, I love knickknacks. I love knickknacks. I wish I could, if I flipped this camera, like it'd probably be embarrassing. Like there's stuff everywhere, right? But it was so weird that it threw me off, like for the interview, to like, why would you have all that there, like during the, you know what I mean? It just seemed like unprofessional and weird. And so just be cautious with that. I still think, I know they always say sit up and be in a whatever and your environment and your, what's behind you. I do think it is important to keep that in mind.
Don't do what I've been doing, running around the house trying to get away from your children.
I got stuck with mine. She's right here. There's one of them. Yeah. Oh, look at him. How cute is that? Hey, hi, Elena.
Now, since there is silence, I would agree with Dr. Elias. Be within mainstream of fashion. Don't, and that I'm talking to both women and men. You don't want to be different than all others. And plus, surgeons are usually very kind of classic in their outfits. You obviously you don't go in shorts and remove all hardware from your nose or lips or whatever, because that would look a little bit strange. And I would not expose too much tattoos, because there's very conservative environment in surgery. If you go to other directions, maybe less conservative, but surgeons, I just came back from American College of Surgeons. I didn't see even one earring or tattoos. Everything was hidden. And obviously there were young people, but they were within mainstream of conservatism. And one more things, I remember one, when we prepare for interviews, so I've read entire applications night before, and then one application stays in my life for years. When someone in personal statement said that she had or he had night dreaming being in the closet with among different suits, and suddenly doors open and he saw future of surgery in front of her or him. Somehow, that we laughed after that, how someone can be so irresponsible, putting something like those statements showing that he or she is immature to be good applicant for surgery. There were some details I don't remember, but I remember that closet and dreams. One more thing. Many people are going and being so nervous about all questions that are being asked during interviews. Don't worry about them. You are not able to read all questions and prepare for all of them if you are going for interviews that are going to ask you about different things. You are graduate of medical school. You are smart, talented, hardworking person who put a lot of efforts to be in the place where you are. Not all people are able to qualify for interviews. There are millions of others who did not make that step of life that you are making right now. So you are in front of them. So you have to be at the same time smart enough to answer practically every question that is being asked. That position that you are currently in, that requires your skills, and you have them. You have entire background. So whatever someone is asking you, you should be ready to answer. At the same time, you can review some esoteric questions and, okay, if he's going to ask me that one, I know how to answer that, period.
Dr. Jones, anything to add?
I was just thinking. I mean, I think in my view, and maybe I'm newer to the game than others. Not saying anything, but I think people have piercings and people have tattoos, and I think that can be celebrated. But I think during the interview, maybe it's not the time, right? I think some of the worst applicants that I can remember, you could see down to their belly button, right? And you just, I mean, that's a nice shirt, but don't wear it to the interview. And I think, if you've got crazy hair, you've got blue hair, and that's great, comb it. Okay, so I mean, be professional, and in a way that is presentable. I think, I mean, everyone's different, and we celebrate, everybody, but at the same time, make sure that you look like you're, presentable. If you can say that, I think some things are, foregone conclusion, but at the same time, I've had applicants come in and they look like they just rolled out of bed and put on a suit, and maybe not, maybe not.
All right, thank you so much. So we're going to take a couple of questions from the chat. There was one question that Ahmed actually said, LORs from big institutions in Canada like Sick Kids, Princess Margaret Cancer Center, or Mount Sinai Hospital, does it count, or would you prefer like more from the States? As a fellow Canadian, I completely get this.
I can tell you that surgery is an old boys club, and a lot of it is who is writing the letter and whether the people reading that letter know that name. That being said, as someone who doesn't necessarily have all those connections yet as a newer attending, if it's an incredible letter of recommendation that is talking about very personal experiences and how you went above and beyond, to me, that's better than a generic from some other spot.
So I can see question about a letter of recommendation from Canada versus US. Canadian institutions are very prominent and they are almost the same quality, offering the same quality of care as American institutions. But I would say that if I put on balance, probably then balance would go to American institutions. So nothing wrong if you put one letter from Canadian and two, three others from American institution.
Okay. And going back to, I guess, imaging of yourself, like how to present yourself, Kyung said, what are your thoughts on getting a backdrop for the interview if it is online?
Do you mean like one of those virtual things? Because I hate those.
I think so, or just like a coffee shop kind of background, or just like a blurred background. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I hate them too. I don't know why. It's not really fair, but in any type of setting, I just am not a big fan. But like I told you, there were a couple people who were very intentful about like literally just the gray wall behind them. And they're very like, everyone's kind of professional and cold and sterile initially, unless they're unless they're Dr. Califell, like super outgoing and just fuzzy, and that kind of throws you off too, especially when it's like kind of a stoic person. So I wasn't you can't have a picture on your wall or have, but like, whatever your setting is for your, work environment or homeschool or homework environment, I think is okay. I just wouldn't overdo it. And like if things are like in the background, fine. But like again, the ones I was talking about were very purposeful. And honestly, I kept like it was distracting my mind and like, why would you this is a surgery and like why? Same with the clothes. Like I do think you should be like your authentic self and it's okay to be unique and different and to have different style, but I do think I would err on the side of being a little bit more conservative than like if you're super like out there with your style choices and appearance. Just having a leaning towards a little bit of conservatism is just safe. It doesn't mean that people don't appreciate and respect, you, but it can be distracting, when it's really out of the top because you spend a lot of time thinking, why? Or, do you know what you're here for? Like, it was not necessary, you don't, it's not the time to be doing that, that's just my thought.
I would not put beach behind me interviewing for the residency position. Rather, like Dr. Heron said, more conservative, something like office. It doesn't matter whether blurred or not blurred, but if you fail, you can say, oh, I failed matching because I had blurred background. It's not going to work that way.
I think a Kyung meant for a backdrop when you get a headshot. Kyung, do you want to come on off of mute and maybe explain? I don't think I understand your question.
Hello, my name is Kyung. I was talking about the actual backdrop that you use at the Photoshop, not the virtual ones.
So I personally prefer someone having kind of like I'm seeing here. So my picture on my screen is too distant. It should be somehow like I'm seeing Ravi and Dr. Jones, Dr. Heron. So it looks much better from my perspective. You know how I do. No, that's I'm not sure whether I will look good. I would not look good, but somehow I prefer a bigger picture of bigger face on the screen. But this is my personal preference.
Pick a solid background.
We're talking about submitted headshots, correct? That's what we're talking about. That's what we're. I have a funny story. So no, it was just a couple of weeks ago. I saw an applicant's picture, and he was literally reclining in a very large easy chair with his what looked like in California we have this California Scholarship Federation thing, and he had this big big sash around him, and he looked like he was on the cover of a GQ, and I couldn't help but laugh because I thought, you either think that you are the greatest thing to medicine, or you just don't know how that looks. And I feel like you don't want to be, just like we were talking about with the dress that day, you don't want to stand out unnecessarily, because I think after after we all looked at the applicant's profile, we all said the same thing. Is that the guy that was lounging in the chair? And I feel like the more you stand out in a way that doesn't I don't know, make you professional and presentable, people will latch onto that, and you'll be that person. Just like Dr. Heron saying, you're the Minnie Mouse girl. You are the one that stood out in a weird way, and maybe not negative. Minnie Mouse is not a real problem, but if you have an obsession with Minnie Mouse that she's decorating the wall behind you, you don't really want to emphasize a really big eccentricity and be, that one, I would say.
Did he have cigar?
No, he was missing the cigar, which would have made it so much cooler.
All right, and she also
everybody comes kind of roboting in with like the exact same navy blue suit, whether it's men, women. That kind of annoys me too. Like, oh, come on, everyone's got like the standard interview suit. Like, you can be like have some style, a little different, but you don't want to be like this autonomon or however you pronounce that word. So yeah, we're confusing you guys. Now you really don't know what to do.
Ravi, someone is asking about categorical or preliminary, what you can do during the interview so that the program will consider you more towards categorical than prelims. I would say that majority of programs right now, they are interviewing for both positions at the same time. And when they are ranking, they can put outstanding applicants on list of categorical residents. And you can ask about that. You can mark, I believe, am I correct that on ERAS application, there are 2 boxes that you can apply to the same programs for both prelim and categorical? So if I'm correct, so you can say that, please rank me also for categorical position. Nothing wrong with that.
But do you think that if you request preliminary or categorical, that is going to take away from your chance for categorical?
No. That programs can list you for both positions, and in matching system, categorical takes precedence over preliminary.
Would you get an interview for both? Or would you only get an interview for one?
When you are interviewing in one institution, so you can interview for both at the same time. But you can ask during interview about that. That might be one of your questions.
Okay. Do you think it detracts, Dr. Heron?
No, I always wonder about that. We actually don't know, like, when we're doing our actual interview, so.
Do you at Mount-Sinai, do you interview for one program, not for both?
No, it's just for one.
But you have prelims, right?
Yeah.
You do. Because sometimes we are seeing outstanding preliminary applicants, so we used to place them on ranking list for categorical positions.
If anybody wants to come off of mute as well and ask their question, you can take a couple before we call it a night. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a quick question, and I actually asked this at the ACS conference as well, but I like different perspectives. What do you suggest for that tell me about yourself? Because you can go in so many different directions. So, what is like a good recipe to properly answer that question? And my name is Neosha Price, by the way, and I'm a third year.
I think what gets you in your comfort zone. And oftentimes that's just where you start. Like, I'm from so and so, who you are, where you're from. And then kind of start with like pertinent things just about you that you also have to make sure are going to be pertinent and important to the person you're in front of, right? You're here interviewing for a surgery position, right? So oftentimes you see in these personal statements very impactful, amazing moments in people's lives of why they wanted to become a doctor, involving maybe a sick loved one or some experience that they had, that kind of thing. So that might be part of, not the whole thing of what you say, but that might be part of it. I think it's just a time to be as authentic as possible because I really think that's why the question's being asked. Like when they want to hear about everything else, they'll ask specifically about those things. So I think it's really more just like an internal thing that probably more than anything is kind of what you're doing now is just practicing it, practicing where your comfort comes in that question and your response. But I do think most of us, when we ask that, are interested in kind of where you come from, who you are, that kind of thing.
So I would follow what Dr. Heron said. You can say, okay, I graduated from college, and after college, I spent 1 year of doing research. That was amazing time to me that I would never forgot. And then I applied to medical school, and I would bet that 80% of interviewers would ask, what did you do in your research? And you have your answers ready like that one, waiting for that question, begging for that he would ask you that question. That was I refer when I was saying about fishing rod. That put that fishing rod, that take him, and he can answer a question that you wanted to be asked.
I think it's hard to give a formula for you to follow, but what I can advise is that you practice coming up with a few options and ask attendings who seem willing or residents who seem willing if you can run your answer by them and get feedback on it.
Oh, and one other thing I wanted to bring up, a lot of you a lot of you have extremely unique, beautiful backgrounds of how you got here and why you're pursuing medicine and why you're even at Ross. And that doesn't mean that you have to explain, well, what happened was, type thing, but it's like some of the applications and conversations that I loved more than anything were people that came from like just varying backgrounds that were very unique because it showed the passion and commitment to make that dream and a reality, that they either stopped some other career line or whatever the story is, and are now here in this moment and trying to get their goal of being a surgeon. Like those stories are just like, that's heartwarming. It's kind of like a movie, right? You're trying to draw them in, keep them there, the fishing, the line, all of that, but it's all authentic as well. So I wouldn't run away or hide from those pasts, because I think just what we want as surgeons is, we know it's a hard job. You need a lot of stamina, you want a lot of commitment, and a lot of you have that, and just how you got here.
Dr. Jones or Dr. Calafell, any other things to add? Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up. What would be your last and final piece? One last thing before we. Oh, there's one last question. If you guys are still okay with it. The last question was something about a sub-I. Sorry, my thing is taking a hot second. If anybody wants to read the chat, my chat's taking a hot second to pull up.
It says, does completing a sub-I or surgical rotation at your program as a fourth-year medical student help during the interview or help with the applicant maybe get a closer look?
Perfect, thank you.
I think
Yes,
it just
that is
depends.
a
Oh,
working
yeah, please.
interview. I was going to say, yes, that's a working interview. So it can really help you or it can absolutely shoot you in the foot.
Yeah, I think that might not be able to be privy to this information, but like it's probably kind of historical for whatever institution you're at, if that's something that they tend to do, if not every year, but at least often. Unfortunately, and I hate this, I just feel like it often really ends up hurting people, not because they did a bad job, not because they didn't stand out, but it's just almost like a chance to just to feel like someone's just not it, right? Even though they might be really great. And that just seems to be it. And like I think also we are very unfair in the world of surgery where people are judged literally instantaneously. And like that first few days, if you're judged one day, and even if you came 1000% full, circle and you're a whole different person the rest of the rotation, for whatever reason in the world of surgery, those first few impressions stay with you. So I have never personally seen or known it to help, although it really should. But I do think there are some institutions that are probably a lot better about that, and it's part of their process where coming to sub-I and doing well gets you in.
I think it can work both ways. I think I've been at institutions where we had fourth years that were incredible, and they got along with people, and maybe their board scores weren't good, but their actions really, they were motivated. They had grit, and they were willing to go the extra mile. And I think they just shown. But I think the same thing. We've had people that were absolutely terrible, and they looked terrible, and just like Elias said, it's a working interview. And so if you really want to be at that program, you better shine. But I think other than that, if you're kind of testing it out, and just be careful because a lot of the times if you don't put in the full effort, they won't return the favor.
And it's back to that personality. Yeah, that's the thing. People talk, and like it's back to the personality test, because there are people who are phenomenal. They're phenomenal, and you think they're phenomenal, and you hear like some side comment from a resident or another attending, and you're like, how come you're looking at the same person? So that's why I think sometimes it goes awry, because it's just a chance for people to jive or not jive with like the you. It's unfortunate, but it is a good opportunity for you to see the inside of another place as well. But I don't know. I think I kind of err against like going to your prime position, because that's the other thing. I think because they already have like extra knowledge of you, you just look a little less than like these mystical people who look so good on paper that they've never like had in front of them. It's an odd kind of dynamic, but that's kind of what I've seen.
Okay, we're going to take one last question and then we'll wrap it up. There was something about shadowing a doctor in your second year. Would that be a good idea to get a good idea from how clinical rotations work? In surgery. Like, do you recommend shadowing surgeons prior to entering clinical rotations?
I think the more exposure you can get, the better.
Yeah, definitely not going to hurt. I think it's a great thing. You learn more. So then by the time you do your clinicals, you're more experienced. And I think more than anything, it just gives you a little more confidence and level of like security in what you're doing. You might feel more comfortable asking questions and like when you're like not in your clerkship. So I don't think it's a negative thing. Also, you might develop a relationship that ends up with like a really, very personal, strong letter of recommendation that you develop from that early on.
Surgery is about networking too. I mean, the more people you know, the more ins you have. And I can't tell you how many times I went to conferences as a med student, and because I knew this person or that person, they introduced me to this person and that person, and I got to meet so many more people that I would have never, known prior to doing any of that. So
I had to phase out because I was eating dinner with all the munchkins. That is 100% true. The surgical world is not as big as you think. It's actually pretty small in the kind of realm of medicine. And when you compare it to internal family medicine, the amount of people that know each other is incredible. So if you get along with somebody and attending, tell them where you're interviewing. Like, obviously, don't give them a list of all 50 programs you're applying, but let's say like your top 5. You never know. It's like, oh, you're applying, for example, for me, you're applying to UConn. I went to UConn. I got my program director's phone number in my cell phone. I'll shoot him a text or an email. That email or text is likely an interview when maybe you didn't get one. It happens all the time. In residency, in fellowship, all the time.
It
Oh,
is
I have
really
a quick
great.
question.
Go ahead.
No, please finish.
Okay, I'll try. Great that we entered that kind of foggy area. I can give you an example. I'm looking at my screen right now, and I'm asking myself why I am not seeing faces of all students that are at this meeting. You, whatever your name is, you should kind of care about your presentation, how you can embed your face in my mind, Dr. Herons, all faculty members here, that somehow we can link your name and with your picture. So whenever you come, I would say, oh, I know you. You were at that meeting. I know you, how you look like. You were interested in surgery beyond standards. You were kind of present at the meeting. Like I know Dr. Calafel. I have never met him personally, but I know that he always has face on the screen. I know Dr. Heron, although she's working kind of one block from me. So that is important. Don't stay away from showing your faces. It's somehow I am against those meetings where you have opportunity to show yourself and you are kind of quitting that opportunity. Thank you.
That's on me. I wanted to make sure.
I see your face. I see your face, Ravi.
I know you see mine, but that's on me. I told everybody to keep it off so everything can, it wouldn't slow down the meeting.
Okay. I didn't know that. I'm telling you what I feel, because let's say I received complaints from students that when they are talking with advisors, there is a phone conversation. So it should be face to face. It's much better. It's better interaction simply. Technology allows that.
One other thing that no one asked, but I'd like to get everyone's opinion on. How do you feel about letters, emails / letters, whatever, after a interview? Do it or don't do it.
Remember, every email, every postcard, every phone call is recorded and placed into personal file. When I said, even when you don't say good morning to housekeeper, that also can end up in your record.
I think a well-written personal brief thank you is always really nice.
Personal.
That's what I would agree with. Personal. Don't make it sound cookie cutter. I literally did it. Granted, this is the time of real interviews. So you had to go to the airport or whatever. So I would actually whip out my laptop like at the airport bar and start writing it right there when it's fresh in my head. And I would add always a personal touch. Hey, Dr. So-and-so, I had a really great time at the interview, especially when we spoke about sports and things like that. One funny one, I think it was St. Agnes. The program director is a very big New York Jets fan. So I'm a Dolphins fan. So obviously we don't like each other, but we got along very well. So I would always, I made a little joke as like, because I think later that weekend, the Dolphins were going to, it's like, oh, by the way, I'm really glad you're a fan of football, but I really hope your team loses next week. So, make it personal because people remember that. If you just write, thank you so much for the privilege and the honor of interviewing you, it smells cookie cutter.
I agree. Do it. Definitely do it. And it's not a letter to the program director, which you should do as well. It's to the person that interviewed you. And then definitely it doesn't have to, it's very obvious when it's just like the same few lines that they just cut and paste for every interview they went to. At least one sentence or two about, I enjoyed this particular part of the discussion that, we enjoyed, not saying I enjoyed this part of the discussion, but like Dr. Calfel said, just some memory from the conversation that personalizes you, because it's another very sad but true bias. I realized that like people that emailed, even ones that I was like, it's kind of like maybe more average candidate, like it put them back into my mind and kind of almost made me rethink. And the other thing I would also recommend is like if the person emails you back, and I know you have to be very careful with these things when it comes times to like around the match and the whole thing. If they email you back, even how we kind of stopped doing like the thank you back and all that kind of thing, I think I would still send like, I appreciate the response or whatever, just acknowledge the fact that they emailed you back, that's my opinion.
And in those personal cards, you can write, I remember someone wrote to me, I was so intrigued during our discussion about some aspects of your life that I saw that you were climbing in Himalaya. So that immediately kind of stayed in my mind when we ranked in all people for positions that, that person took time to look into my kind of additional esoteric experiences.
And
That's
actually,
happened.
it does come
That's
up.
happened, Dr. Jones. That's happened.
It does come up at the rank meeting, because sometimes when people are close or having alternate views of something, interest actually does become important. Like, hey, he actually emailed me. It seems kind of interesting. It comes up, and I think honestly, I think it's a net positive.
I would also write a thank you to the coordinator, because they put in so much work. They take you all around, they set everything up. And so to, number one, be incredibly polite and thankful to them in person, but then also write them a thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all the advice and answering everybody's questions. I think we're about to wrap it up. I know we need to respect your guys' time. You probably guys have work in the morning, as do most of us. But thank you again. And we can't, like I said, we can't thank you enough for taking the time and answering all our questions. And everything that you've done for the club as well, Dr. Heron and Dr. Rudnicki.
Thank you. I would like to congratulate entire club and Hashim and Ravi and Rachel, and also people that I can see faces right now, Fazela, Austin, Kanan, and all others for hard work, and Christine for hard work that you've done to organize that, and for everything what you are doing for surgery interest groups. Thank you very much and congratulations. And I think that this is very important meeting, very, very successful. And thank you all faculty members, Dr. Heron, Dr. Jones, Dr. Elias, Dr. Calafat, for your time and contributions and comments. It looks like we all are talking about the same thing, sometimes with different words, different phrases, but we are one team working together. Thank you.
My last comment would be, don't give up. Do not give up. it is so worth it to do this. So no matter what happens in an interview, through this process, don't give up.
Thank you.
If I could just also say thank you, I just want to say thank you to everyone. And just because Dr. Calafel said he's a Dolphins fan, I gotta say that I'm a Broncos fan, and that is not right what you guys did to us. We will talk about that one day.
We should have
Have a
kicked the
good night.
field goal. I wanted the record. I'm
Dude,
petty. I wanted the record.
I like
wanted-
you way less now. I'm just gonna turn off my camera now. Thank you. I'm just kidding.
I'm sorry.
Thank you
I'm
for
sorry
coming.
you're a Broncos fan this year. I am very sorry.
Thank you.
Broncos,
Really.
Broncos. I remember only Ford Bronco.
You know what? Let's keep it with that one. Right now, we don't want to talk about the Denver Broncos. Good night, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Students and faculty, I appreciate you all.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you again.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.